This week on London Real, I have a one-to-one chat with Wietse van der Werf, the founder of Blackfish.
The scale of what we're destroying in the oceans, which essentially is the largest biodiversity we have on this planet, which is really the life support system we have. The level of destruction is just astronomical, and we're not seeing it, it's not visible. We're talking corporations that are breaking the law, destroying the environment, destroying what essentially allows us to live on this planet, the ocean. A strong movement of citizens that say we've had enough of this stuff, like we just don't stand for it.
Do you ever think your life's in danger by what you're doing?
I mean, we have to be careful. You know, we're dealing with big interests. When a species is this endangered, do we need more lobbying? Do we need more talking? A fully trained drone pilot sits on shore, is literally steering it, and you're getting a live stream.
And who makes that call to go in and cut the nets? I mean, is that your call?
That is, I guess, the Blackfish's call.
London Real presents Wietse van der Werf, Blackfish.
If we see something that is it's clear that it's illegal, then we're willing to take that extra step.
This week on the show, we welcome Wietse van der Werf, and he is the founder of an organization called Blackfish. And besides being a very cool sounding name, these guys have a very serious mission, and that is to prevent the overfishing of our oceans, which they believe could lead to very serious issues for us in the future when it comes to ecology in general. And what I really like about these guys is that they take action. They actually go out there, and when they see some things that are not being done correctly, some laws that are being broken, they don't mind putting on the scuba gear and cutting nets if that's necessary, whether it's to free undersized bluefin tuna off the coast of Croatia, or whether it's in Japan when they're actually freeing dolphins from some of the killing fields that we saw in the movie The Cove, an excellent documentary to check out. So I had them on, or Wietse on, just to talk about the cause and some of the actions they want to take and how they see their organization as more of like a grassroots movement of people that are willing to take action. And it could be you, whether you're actually just checking out some of the ports in your local city and trying to make sure if some of these illegal fishing nets are being used, or whether you want to help them and get on the boats and go out there and police some of the areas of the Mediterranean. And I just think they've got a really interesting mission, and it's important to be aware of a lot of these things. And as I said on the show, you don't get to see what's going on under the ocean. It's very hard to hug a fish. And so it's hard to know that this is a very serious issue. And I think Wietse really broke it down in a very good way. You know, they kind of have an aspect about them that's a bit militant, but also very sensible and very intelligent. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope we can be bringing you more of that type of kind of activism-related stuff going forward on London Real. If you have any suggestions about that, then please send me links or people that you think should be on the show. If you saw last week's episode with Mr. Peter Sage, a lot of you did and you really enjoyed it. I was really privileged to sit down with that man, but he talked about making changes in your life by upgrading your peer group. And I really think that resonated with a lot of you guys, and it resonates with me. It's something that I try to do every year, as far as get rid of the people in my life that are bringing me down and introduce new people in life that will bring me up. And it can sound a bit brutal, but it can also just be the right thing to do, from an evolution standpoint. So we're teaming up with the guys at X-Brain, and we're bringing a contest called the I Am Way Better contest. And what we're going to try to do is upgrade your peer group and bring you in touch with some of the people that have graced our presence here at London Real, that have come in the studio and dropped science about their lives and about aspects. And we're kicking it off with one of my favorites, a good friend of mine and multiple-time co-host, Mr. Timothy Sheaf. Yes, the world champion parkour and free runner, the guy that's gone on to host the Flow Show on YouTube and cook with Jamie Oliver, is going to come in and give you a free running lesson, and I'm going to be there too. He's going to put me through the paces and put me on a building, and you can qualify for this. We're going to be bringing someone like that every month here on London Real, but I want to thank the guys at X-Brain that are supporting this show and supporting this contest. So this is how you can be a part of it. What I need you to do is tweet me a picture of a product that you've gotten from Xbrain. These guys support the show. You can go to xbrain.co.uk, use the customer code LondonReal, get 15% off, and tweet me a picture of what you got, whether it's the Way Better protein powder, which I love, the Xanarex fat burner, they got a multivitamin, colon cleanse, they got a digestive enzyme, they have all sorts of great products there. Tweet me out a picture and you will be entered for this contest, and then next month we will choose someone to come and go do some free running with myself and Timothy Sheaf, and we're going to be doing something every few weeks, and it's a chance for you to upgrade your peer group, maybe learn a few things, and get you to change your life. So I hope you guys like that. The hashtag is #IamWayBetter. Tweet that out, and I'll be retweeting your pictures, and then we're going to choose someone at the end of the month to come go free running with us. So I hope you guys like that. Always looking for feedback, whether you guys are feeling these things or not. It's just nice not to just do a broadcast out, but to get you guys coming in as well. So there you go, the saga continues. I hope you guys are enjoying these holidays. We got more cool guests in. We've got Taylor Marie in next week, and she's a girl that's put up a lot of very interesting videos on YouTube about her own experiences with DMT, ayahuasca, and the Big Daddy Iboga, something I have not touched yet. And I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions. If you've got some questions for her, please tweet them into me and I will ask her in studio. She is moving to Peru in a couple weeks with her partner, and they're going to set up a wellness center down there. I don't know much about it, and I want to ask her about it on the show. So please send through those. And that's it. I want to thank our final sponsor, which are the guys at Bulletproof. You know I love this coffee. It's free of molds and toxins. You mix it up with the grass-fed butter every morning and your brain octane oil, which is the best of the coconut oil, and you blend that up, and you know, I don't think I've missed a day in the last, I don't know, 5 months or something, and I love this stuff. I'm a big fan. If you want to buy that, you can go to their new upgraded site called upgradedself.com. They got lower shipping costs, and the whole thing works really smoothly in the States. And of course, if you're in the UK and Europe, like me, you can go to the folks at Xbrain. They've got that coffee and the MCT oil as well. So check that out. As you know, this show is free, and it stays that way by supporting guys like Bulletproof and now Xbrain, and they're sponsoring this whole I Am Way Better campaign. So go to those guys, pick up a product. Like I said, they're all very good. Tweet me out a picture, and then come on, let's go free running. Maybe we can do it here in Hoxton Square. I'm sure Timothy can show me how to jump on one of these trees or do something like that. I think he's going to put me through the paces, and we'll film that as well and send that out to you guys. So anyways, thanks for all the support. As you know, we're on Twitter. Tweet me out. Come to our brand new website at londonreal.tv, and keep up the support. And now I leave you with Mr. Wietse van der Werf, the founder of Blackfish. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. We are sponsored today by the folks at Xbrain. They are the makers of Way Better protein powder. It's organic, made from free-range, grass-fed cows and sweetened with stevia. You can go to xbrain.co.uk and get 15% off by using the code LondonReal. We are also sponsored by the folks at Bulletproof Coffee. It is a coffee that's free of molds and toxins. I mix it up with grass-fed butter and brain octane oil. It makes a great meal, and it's how I start every day. And what can I say? You know, I look like I'm 10 years younger than I am, right?
Totally.
Okay, I appreciate that. So check those guys out. You can buy that coffee at Xbrain in the UK and Europe, or you can get it at upgradedself.com in the USA. Thanks to Dave Asprey, the Bulletproof executive. On to our show. Our guest today is Mr. Wietse van der Werf, who is the founder and international director of the Blackfish, which is an international marine conservation movement on a mission to end industrial overfishing of our oceans. As far as I understand it, you work to expose and challenge illegal and destructive fishing practices. Welcome to London Real.
Thank you for having me. No,
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You know, I heard about you and your movement, and there's a few elements I like about that I'm going to get into later in the program, which is one of the reasons you're here. One of those is that you favor action, which is what I quite like about your movement, because I find certain parts of this new younger generation don't always do that. So I always like that about you guys. But if we were going to get right into it, if you could just tell me, what is Blackfish, or what is a Blackfish, and why do you give a shit? Why have you based your life around this movement?
I guess when I was younger, I cared for the environment, sort of always been involved environmental activism, very much encouraged from my parents from an early age. And then got involved in different projects. And a few years ago, I really realized that what's happening in the ocean is just on an entirely different level. The scale of what we're destroying in the oceans, which essentially is the largest biodiversity we have on this planet, which is really the life support system we have. The level of destruction is just astronomical, and we're not seeing it. It's not visible. And once you get into it, and then, it's kind of scary. I mean, the fish is running out. We are, there acidification in the ocean, the pollution, the ocean is really heavily on a threat. It's dying. And I think, well, what is perhaps then even more mad about it is that a lot of laws and regulations to properly protect that ocean are actually already there. So perhaps we don't need to campaign more or protest or lobby more for, better policies. Maybe we should try and find ways to actually ensure that there is enforcement of the ones that are already there. So, that is something that just kind of struck me. And I guess, having been involved in different other conservation organizations, really felt that we could start with sort of a clean slate and we could look at a new approach of doing things. And with the Blackfish, that's, more than having an organization or being that professional activist going out there and doing sort of this kind of work. It's very much about how do we inspire a wider movement, social movement of citizens to really stand up and say, hey, wherever you stand in this debate, however you view this, the ocean or fish consumption or wherever you, whatever is your viewpoint, surely we can all agree that we all rely on a healthy ocean and that at least the illegality needs to end.
You said that very accurately. You can't see it, and I can't go hug a fish. So it's a tricky one because you can't be like PETA, see the animals and the fur, and you can't, it's all happening under the ocean. It's hard to see a direct link coming back to us as a society, yet it's there. So is it a tricky thing to get people to pay attention to from that?
It's very difficult. It's very abstract.
Right.
Divers, the sailing community, scientists, those people, I guess, see that world. They experience it. Divers that go back to places around the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, after 10 years or, they see big changes. They see that life in the ocean is just disappearing. Areas that used to flourish, especially around certain coral reefs, now might be dead, like deserted. Areas where, before it was a proper habitat and ecosystem might be that bottom trawlers, these sort of nets that sort of scrape along the ocean bed, pretty much leave a sort of moon-like landscape. So those people see that it's very apparent to them. So the question is, how do you get the wider public? How do you get more people to view it? And that is that's a challenge for sure.
You guys are known for going in and taking direct action. I mean, I've read some articles, and you guys are, diving in the middle of the night and cutting nets, in these, Croatian, places where these commercial fishermen are there who I'm guessing would not be very impressed with you doing this. And you've been in Japan as well, freeing some of the dolphins there. I mean, can you tell me why that is such an integral part of Blackfish as far as this action? I mean, is this illegal action that you're taking?
No, essentially we are enforcing the law.
Okay.
So essentially what we're focusing on is to expose and challenge the illegal practices that go on. Just because something is legal does not mean isn't very destructive. So there is an element there of just focusing on the things that are destructive. But for a large part, the things that are illegal are still happening on a big scale. The overfishing of bluefin tuna is a big one. Bluefin tuna is the largest of all tuna species, and really, this is like the tiger of the ocean. This fish can accelerate faster than a Ferrari ever could. Literally 2-3 flips of its tail fin, and it will reach speeds of 55, 60 miles an hour. And at the moment, it's worth more in its weight than silver. So $50,000 to $70,000 is what paid for a single fish.
For a single fish.
Yeah.
I don't think people have an idea the size of the tuna, because all they know is tuna in a can. But they are these huge fish.
Enormous.
And the prime ones can fetch even 10 times that on the Japanese market, right?
Yeah. So what we've seen is, very much from the 1956s onwards, technologies like sonar, increase in engine efficiency, it basically meant that those things that were developed, those techniques that were developed during the Second World War, became available to other uses. So the fishing industry experienced this big sort of industrialization, the golden age of fishing. And with that came very much this push of, how do we promote this bluefin tuna, which traditionally, especially in Asia, which is now the biggest consumer of it, wasn't eaten. People considered it quite a dirty sort of meat.
Okay.
So what we've experienced is very much this big push, also with subsidy money from the EU in the Mediterranean, which is a big area for bluefin tuna, heavily overfished in recent years, and we're now at a situation where it's literally at the brink of extinction. And on the action part, we've always said, when a species is this endangered, do we need more lobbying? Do we need more talking? Like at some point, especially if the law is so clear on it, the law states that you cannot catch the bluefin tuna under 35 kilos, because the baby tuna, if you catch them, they haven't even had a chance to reproduce. What's really happening in the oceans is that literally the animals can't reproduce fast enough to kind of feed our demand for cheap fish.
Right.
And, the bluefin tuna is as endangered as the white rhinoceros and elephants and everything else. So,
but again, because people can't see them and touch them and go to the reserve and take pictures with them, it makes it easier to forget about.
And there is a lot of money to be made. And this is the thing that when in sort of 10 years ago, it was clear that bluefin tuna is, nearing extinction. Then you'd think the international community, especially also in politics, would stand up and do something. But this is exactly where the industry wanted it to be. And this is known as the economics of extinction. Imagine that you can catch those few remaining tuna and you can deep freeze them and put them in storage. Imagine if the species is gone. You're literally sitting on a commodity that's now worth more than silver in its weight, and you can set the price. So Mitsubishi is a company that buys up 80% of the bluefin tuna caught every year and puts it in deep freeze storage. And we're seeing big investment money from companies that have nothing with fishing traditionally. And it's just, this is just a good investment opportunity. So they're literally banking on the fact that this species is going extinct.
Really?
And that's turning in profits.
How long can you freeze those things for?
For years.
Really?
They blast freeze them, yeah.
And so they're really holding that commodity until it becomes something extinct or rare.
Yeah. So what we did, to come back on action, last year, we investigated this company of Croatia. They have these tuna farms, so they catch the tuna in the wild and they put them in these sort of pens at this farm offshore.
And why in Croatia? Why is it just the legality there? The enforcement is a little more difficult?
So the interesting thing
is... That's EU, right?
No. They're keen to join the EU.
Okay. Which
also makes it interesting. But the Adriatic Sea, which is where Croatia is located, is a relatively shallow sea. And what science is just sort of catching up on is, some people basically now conclude that the tuna, when they spawn, basically the baby tuna, that they live in the Adriatic for 2-3 years before they join the kind of elders, the bigger groups, again, the bigger schools. So what the Croatians were doing is basically, despite this ban on the fishing of the baby tuna, they were catching them specifically, and they were claiming that it was their traditional right because it's outside of their territory. But essentially, if you catch all these fish in large numbers, the species literally doesn't stand a chance. Imagine if you're catching all the rhino or elephant babies and you were to, catch them. So anyway, we were there to investigate. We were there for a couple of weeks investigating this company, which the Prime Minister of Croatia and also a former Army General have some special interest in some personal investment in there.
Okay. How do you investigate something like this? You have to pose as a tourist? What do you do?
Yeah, partly. I guess a big part is being there, documenting, like every piece of the puzzle is found, being at these pens, watching the company, finding out in the public records about it. All these things, a big part of what we're doing now is investigating illegal fishing, and for a large part, it's really investigating organized crime. Especially in the Mediterranean, there's a lot of mafia involvement in the fishing, and it is really just about putting those puzzle pieces together. And sometimes that's through just watching little things, and sometimes you might get a bigger sort of tip off or bigger information.
Do you ever think your life's in danger by what you're doing?
No, don't. We have to be careful. We're dealing with big interest. Wildlife crime is, I think, number 3 after narcotics, and organized crime is massively involved in illegal logging, illegal trade in wildlife, and illegal fishing is, of course, a big part of it. So there's a lot of money involvement in it. But the question is also, what do you put against this sort of level of corruption and illegality? The only thing you can really do is have a strong movement of citizens that say, we've had enough of this stuff, we just don't stand for it.
Okay. Is the press your ally? Is the internet your ally? If you can expose these places with pictures, with video, are they out?
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
This is the thing. We live in a time where even as individuals, we have enormous power. Exposing a company like this, talking to the media about what's going on, suddenly, you're not just going to be, you don't just disappear. Suddenly we are, and that's, I think, with the blackfish, we've only existed for 3 years, grown very rapidly. Suddenly we are, I guess, out there, and, and people take us, well, I'd like to think, slowly are taking us a little bit seriously because we're growing in numbers, and
Because if you can show direct evidence, like these guys are breaking the law, we have evidence of them doing this, it's very hard for them not to be prosecuted, or it's very hard for the politicians not to take some action.
Exactly, and this is exactly where the Blackfish is heading. So what we are essentially doing is saying, well, there are these areas where there's a lot of illegality, the ocean is literally under threat, but corruption just allows it to continue. So what we are doing is we're training citizens as kind of citizen inspectors, literally training them as fishery inspectors, putting them out in the fish markets, in the ports, and documenting what's happening. And the idea is that evidence actually builds prosecution in areas where so far the corruption has meant no prosecution is happening. And of course, that's a very strong, that's quite a strong thing to do.
Okay. What's a win when you go into this place in Croatia? Like, what are you thinking is a win for you? Like, in so many weeks, you're going to have some evidence. Is it cutting the nets? Is it documenting it?
Yeah.
And what did happen in Croatia?
So there's always a lot of documenting and evidence gathering, but in Croatia, we realized that there were 2 of the pens that were stationed there offshore. So they basically put the fish in there and then feed them to sort of fatten them up.
How long do they keep them there in these farms?
Can be a few weeks, can be even up to 3-4 months.
And these are long-term investments, so they don't mind waiting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, if you're catching the baby fish, then of course you need to feed them quite a bit to ensure that they reach proper size. I mean, if you can get, if you can get prices of over $70,000 for a single fish, then having those few extra kilos in there is going to, turn a good profit. Okay. So we were there, and what we realized is that 2 of the pens were holding really small fish. So you have to imagine this is sort of this was at night. So we're doing some investigation at night, and you have these islands of Croatia. And this is an island that's really, far out from the mainland, really, at sea. And there's these sort of watchtowers and there's security boats hovering overhead. This is I think it's the second largest bluefin tuna farm in the whole world. And it's really big, and there's a lot of money involved.
And the farm's legal, they just shouldn't have the small fish in there.
Correct. The farm is legal. Okay. There's some rumors going around that they're involved in all sorts of illegality, but basically we're finding these 2 pens with baby fish. And the thing is that they were caught in the region, in that area where this farm was located. So we kind of thought, let's do it. So we went in, divers went in, and literally while the security boats were hovering overhead, with scuba gear, and they opened the nets and released 1,000 of these fish. Which, of course, in monetary terms is a lot of money. But really, we're talking about a species that literally, it's nearing extinction.
And who makes that call to go in and cut the nets? I mean, is that your call?
That is, I guess, the Blackfish's call, whoever that is.
Because, I mean, you don't have to do that. You could try to expose it and go through these other means.
Correct. But I think there has to come a time where you do, we want to make we want to get some direct results for these species. We could try and, you do things through the media, you do gather your evidence and everything else. But if there is an opportunity to do something more direct, then, why would you not do so? And I think this issue is also going to be pushed further by the fact that we're showing people, hey, we can do stuff. And actually, we didn't need millions of pounds and big ships and everything. It was just some people in scuba gear. Actually, it cost very little money. We had big results. It was the biggest release of endangered tuna ever.
And what if they would have caught you? What would have happened?
They didn't catch us.
But if they did, I mean, they would have. It would have been dangerous. They would have beat you up,
potentially,
to say the least.
Yeah. But I think this is we should be prepared for these things, and safety is the main concern always. But we have to be willing to stand up to these kind of literally. I mean, we're talking corporations that are breaking the law, destroying the environment, destroying what essentially allows us to live on this planet, the ocean. We have to be willing to stand up to this. And unless we're willing to go a bit further in our actions, we have to take those extra steps. But that doesn't mean that actually, the majority of our work is, it isn't all about this sort of action. The majority of the work is about gathering evidence, building cases for prosecution, really aiding the enforcement of these kind of laws.
Okay. There's a famous quote by Malcolm X, which is by any means necessary. And, during the civil rights movement in the 60s, him and Martin Luther King would always be arguing, because Martin Luther King was turn the other cheek, we shall overcome. Malcolm X was, we got to do some things here. You sound like you come in the latter camp.
I wouldn't say by all means necessary. Okay. I think you have to draw the line somewhere. We, for example, won't go to a tuna farm and blockade ourselves to the gates and protest. We very much choose the kind of enforcement route. If we see something that is it's clear that it's illegal, then we're willing to take that extra step. And I think that's justified, and we get away with it simply because these companies know that they're breaking the law. They know that they're involved in something dodgy. And we shouldn't forget that if you look at Africa, And in Tanzania, for example, where rhinos and elephants and everything get killed by poachers, which is really the same situation.
Yeah.
I mean, poachers get killed instantly, you know. There's literally a war going out there to protect endangered wildlife. And really, I guess we are taking that sort of struggle and applying it to the oceans and saying, well, you know, actually the fish are equally, if not more important, well, not more important, but, you know, are equally as important. These are species that we need to protect. The tuna are the king of that ecosystem, you know. It's the same with sharks. Sharks get an incredibly bad deal in the ocean, and we need them.
Okay. What's the difference between you guys and an organization like Greenpeace? I mean, Greenpeace wouldn't do these things, would they? It's a different kind of organization, a different agenda.
Greenpeace has done a lot of work for the oceans, amazing campaigning over the years. I guess we are very much focused specifically on the fishing side, and we're focused specifically on Europe and specific on the illegality. So we have a very narrow focus, which I think for us means that on the illegal overfishing of the European seas, which is a major problem, about 80% of the European fish populations are now believed to be overfished. And they reckon up to 40% of all the fish caught in Europe is caught illegally. 40%. So I guess by being so focused on it, I guess we're really hoping to achieve some very specific results. And Greenpeace, Greenpeace just does a lot of things. And I guess we're very much looking to find our sort of niche and make sure we're very successful with that.
And you want to build a social organization more than a big bureaucratic organization. Is that right?
I guess, yeah.
You seem to have different theories.
Yeah. Like the question is, what's the added value to us being there? And we don't need another organization that asks for the membership and just asks for donations. I mean, we need donations just like everybody else. But it's something that we're building together. We don't have major structural funders. We don't have, big sort of money behind us. It's something that's very much been built from the grassroots. And I think we started 3 years ago with literally nothing, just a couple of people, and we're just sort of building it up. And this year we ran 7 projects and campaigns in 9 countries across Europe. So it's grown very rapidly, and I think that's only evidence of the fact that a lot of people care about this issue. And I also want it to be that, If the Blackfish is a success, that will be because a lot of people are getting involved in making it happen. Right.
It's almost like a Kickstarter campaign, like the fact that it is homegrown and grassroots gives it its strength,
And gives it legitimacy.
Yeah, true.
I mean, there's also something, I guess, about activism. I could say, I think it's morally wrong that endangered fish, that there's this illegal overfishing. But I only want to work on this thing knowing that I have the full backing of many, many people and a big community of people all around Europe, and that we do that together. And especially if we're talking about these sort of bigger companies and corporations that, continue to be involved in this sort of crime. We very much need to do it together. And I also think everything we've done so far, whether it's designers or fundraisers or legal experts, or it's a marine engineer, or it's divers, or all these different skills are people that have those professional skills and give them in a voluntary capacity. And I think there's a lot of strength to people, putting their personal skills and maybe the profession they have, to give some of that in their free time to further a cause like this.
Okay. How do you guys fund yourselves? And what is your dream scenario for Blackfish? I know you're looking for boats. I mean, what do you really need to operate? It's not like you need 10 million pounds to get your job done, right?
No.
So how much do you need? What do you use it for? And where do you usually get your money from?
Yeah. So there's been a few bigger donors. There's a few different companies, Lush, who make the soap, for example. They sponsored us, yeah.
Wow, fantastic.
With a bit of money. Patagonia, the maker of outdoor gear.
Okay.
So they're very keen to, and they literally just give money and say, great, we love their work, just do it. And
those are big names. Those are big endorsements.
Yeah. So that's really good. Then there's a few foundations give money, and there's a lot of people who organize benefit concerts. Go to the village, make cakes and sell them. And there's a growing group of children in different schools who raise funds, which I think is very, very encouraging. Okay. I guess we're reaching a point now where we are off on an amazing start. And the question is, where do we go next? And what we have envisioned is this plan for the next 3 years. As I said, we're sort of training these citizen inspectors. So literally around Europe, we have different people that we train during spring in a couple of weekends. So you don't need to sort of give up your career and family life. We can literally train you. And then sort of 10 days, 12 days during the fishing season, we send you out and you help collect evidence.
Kind of like the Army Reserves in the States,
Well, that's one comparison.
Okay.
But it's literally, it's just having a presence. You could really say that this is an industry that so far has operated in relative obscurity. And I guess we're trying to affect scrutiny. The fact that there's people there, we're documenting what's happening. People don't get away with things so easily. And so the plan that's devised literally is the effective monitoring of the European seas and ports during the fishing seasons, all over Europe, mostly focused on the Baltic Sea and the Mediterranean.
Okay.
And it means that in 3 years' time, we can train enough citizen inspectors to effectively double the amount of fishing inspectors in Europe. So it's quite an ambitious plan. And with that is the fact that we hope to get a smaller patrol vessel out in the Mediterranean permanently. Buying that patrol vessel and running it for sort of a couple of years costs around about 900,000 pounds.
Okay.
So that's an initial big investment. But we stay in Europe. We never need the ships to go into the Antarctic or across the Atlantic. We keep things very localized. And it also means then, after that initial purchase with bits of investment, little bits of money, we can actually quickly initiate sort of localized campaigns in the Mediterranean especially.
Okay. What's been the hardest thing that you've had to deal with when it comes to blackfish? And what's been the thing that's surprised you the most? That's been like, the easiest thing, or the thing you just didn't think it would be so fortuitous to happen?
I've been surprised by how quickly it's grown. Like I've never, I guess, I'm its founder, and I'm, sort of had an idea, and I've always been somebody that in activism or in this kind of project, kind of very much in a facilitating role. I'm not somebody that normally is on the forefront, so to kind of have that idea and to communicate it, and I've been very surprised by this many different people, especially from different backgrounds. People that do work in the police and say, hey, this is a kind of crime, I want to do something about it. And in their free time, they come and work with us. Or, somebody that literally works as a tube driver in the London Underground and just meets us randomly in a pub and goes like, actually great, like I'm really inspired, I want to do stuff, and ends up coordinating all our volunteers, in the UK for a while. Like those, I've been really surprised how ordinary people have taken sort of ownership over the issue and just kind of gone with it. And I think that really inspires me to continue the work.
And you've been on a 6-week speaking tour here, all around the UK or all around Europe, or what?
Yeah, around the UK.
That's the long tour.
Yeah.
So there's interest here.
Yeah, I mean it's been amazing. So we've done this tour. The idea was really like, it's all very well to be on social media and talk to people and get your issues and photos and your posts out there, but there's no substitute for meeting people in real life, talking to them, do this, the real communication, the people stuff.
Yeah. We were talking about it earlier in the kitchen, which is where most of our great podcasts get left. But yeah, that one-to-one looking in people's eyes or into many people's eyes if you're presenting, there's still no substitute with that. And with social media and YouTube videos so dominant in our world, we forget that sometimes as humans.
We do. And especially if you making conservation relevant to people, that really means you meet them, and you meet them, and you talk about their local issues. Like we did a lot of touring around Scotland in the last few weeks, been all the way up into the Shetlands, Dundee, Aberdeen, Glasgow, all these places where there are also local marine issues. There are local strandings, pollution issues, overfishing, illegality. So it's very powerful. And when you are, for example, in Glasgow and you're in a lecture theatre with 120 students, who at the end of it are just raving and just getting active, and that's very powerful. It's really
that must be really
awesome.
Inspiring too. And if everyone's in the same mindset, it must really inspire you too.
Yeah.
And what's been the most difficult thing about the organization over the last few years?
I guess the thing is, starting an organization is one thing that's kind of a bit tricky, especially in these sort of times. It's not like there's lots of money and funding around to just fund things. Then starting to work on an issue that's really a bit is not. There's not a lot known, and it's an issue that not many people sort of work on. So in a way, we're pioneering a sort of new approach, and we're working on an issue that very few people are really, if you want to protect whales or dolphins or turtles, there's more support for that sort of thing. As soon as you start talking about fish and you are not necessarily just promoting so-called sustainable fish, then it's sort of a new area. So that's been very tricky, and it's been tricky to also start international straight away. So straight away, we've been definitely punching above our weight, but that's also been the way to just do it, and to just and reach that bigger, reach those bigger goals. So
There's been some celebrity chefs like Jamie Oliver and others that are into this. Two things I want to ask you about: sustainable fishing as one type of phrase, and the other one is that they're for this type of fishing where they throw away the discards. Is that it? I was wondering if you could explain that issue and then explain if you agree with them or not.
Yeah. Let's start on the sustainable fishing.
Yeah, let's do that. Because we hear that dropped in everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Even when you're at a nice restaurant in London, it'll be in the small print on the bottom.
The buzzword.
Everybody wants to hear it. They can sleep well at night, but I don't even know if we even know what it means. You know, line caught tuna. I don't know. Anyways, go ahead. You're the expert.
It's something fairly clever, I guess, marketing-wise. To be honest, I think 90% of what is labeled as sustainable, the scientific evidence is now coming out more and more that actually can prove that it's not truly sustainable. It's a very noble idea to say, let's improve things in the industry, let's make things more sustainable. But if you're then, as labels or as certification bodies are setting quite mild criteria, then in order to certify the bigger kind of companies and the bigger kind of fishing operations that also are the ones that are supporting your certification programs, to make sure that they pass the mark. This is really what it is. And the thing is, if let's say you grow organic potatoes and you promote that and more people want them, that means that simply means you grow more. But with fish, you cannot do that. So the more people want sustainable fish, the more pressure there is on those very vulnerable fish stocks or fish populations. And mackerel is a good example, was promoted for many years as the sustainable fish. But actually its popularity has meant its demise. And they're now looking at reclassifying it. So actually it might get threatened status. So if you eat sustainable fish, it literally means you eat as little to no fish at all. That really means, eating sustainable fish.
Are you a vegan, or do you promote veganism?
I don't eat fish.
Okay.
And I think, and perhaps because I know too much, but I think it's, I don't like telling people what they should or shouldn't do. I think, if anything, the consumption of fish should be controversial and people should ask questions. And, to see fish promoted as this sort of hip and green alternative to meat is dangerous in its own right. Is dangerous, yeah. Okay. And I think, and that's almost, I'm almost sometimes surprised by the fact that some NGOs continue to promote, this consume fish, whereas really we're too many humans eating too few fish. That's really the reality.
Right. It's interesting these days because now these days, as opposed to say 20 years ago, when you sell someone a product, you have to sell them the product that they want. And then you also have to sell them the mind frame they get to have about the product, whether their iPad is built in China with workers that are paid well, or whether their fish is sustainable, or their cow is organic, or the sofa they're going to buy will be recycled someday, and that's almost a part of the sales pitch, and you can't, but as we're talking about, you can't really sell it without having that buzzword there. So it is.
And people are sensitive to it. And I think, and in a way that's good. I know people care. A lot of people care about this. I think, even if you love eating fish, even if you're a fisherman, then something needs to radically change in how we're treating the ocean. So I think, this is also an issue that's going to affect everybody. And we shouldn't forget that the majority of the world's population, living predominantly in the global south, rely, on seafood for the main source of protein. Just to give an example, Ghana is interesting. It's a country where, its population relies on fishing to survive. And when we get to the sort of late 1990s, there is a different company or industry and government representatives come up with this idea called joint venture agreement. So the idea is they go to, the waters around Europe are increasingly overfished. There's some kind of issues, and so they kind of look further afield and they see these big waters of the west coast of Africa, especially, that are very, plentiful, very rich fishing grounds. And I think, hey, that's a good idea. So they approach, for example, the government in Ghana and they say, how about we have this great idea, we'll give you a few £1 million and you can build hospitals and schools and then, but you decide here and then you give us access to your waters. And literally in a number of months, these industrialized fleets start moving in, literally just within a time span of sort of 8 to 10 years, just emptying the waters completely. And we're now in a situation where the population of Ghana needs to import more seafood from the EU than it can catch itself. So this is, besides an environmental or an animal welfare, whatever issue, this is very much a social justice issue as well.
Right, and a resource issue, I guess. Or
it's a food security issue, if anything, yeah.
Right, just to give people visually, that you have a great animated video online, which is amazing that you produced it anyways, because I think you had 20 or 30 people around the world involved in this great animation. But some of these fish nets are hard to fathom the scale, right? They're dragging these nets that are, I know they're not all 50 miles long, but some of these are just, the scope is hard to fathom as a human. What are they doing? And then get into this discard issue. But what does one of these operations look like when it's on a large scale?
Let me give one example. A fish technique fairly commonly used is known as bottom trawling.
Okay.
And a trawl is really a net that you pull the back of the ship and you catch fish. And a bottom trawl is a net that is lowered to the seabed. And essentially the idea is that the bottom-dwelling fish that live on the bottom of the sea, that they get sort of scared off by the vibration that the net creates and that they get caught in it. Now, such a net could be 100, 120 meters in width. It could be up to 600 meters long. And essentially what it does is it clear fells the seabed. So essentially cutting everything just to get to those few species. It is a bit like you were to go into a woodland to catch 2 or 3 wild boar, and you were to surround the entire woodland with bulldozers, cutting everything just to get to those few animals you want.
All right. And it drags along the ocean bottom. So
NASA has been able to make photographs from space, in the North Sea especially, that they can see the tracks that these bottom trawlers leave behind from space.
From space.
They can literally see it. And then there's some areas in the North Sea, again, where the same area has been bottom trawled in a time span of sort of 10 years, like 5 to 7 times the same area. So nothing can regenerate.
So it just ruins the whole ecosystem.
It's just plowing through the seabed. And of course, it's a very, the seabed is crucial. That habitat, that is very much where life forms. And we've only really explored 6% of the ocean floor. As humans, we've been there. And we're finding out about species now, sometimes because they simply come on board of trawlers, dead, and we never see them again in the wild. Essentially, we are destroying that world more rapidly than we really have a chance to discover it. And I think that is the real tragedy.
Okay, so that's one of the things that you're talking about. The discard issue. I know people like Jamie have said it's okay if we take these small fish that get caught up in the nets and we throw them back. I mean, or explain it. But do I have that wrong? What is a discard, and why is that something we need to be aware of?
So when a fisherman goes out to catch fish, they tend to use nets or lines or different types of fishing techniques that actually don't just catch those fish. They're catching a lot of other fish as well. There's some extreme examples. For example, shrimp trawlers. Shrimp is very much at the bottom of that food chain. So wherever the shrimp is will be all those other species. So in shrimp fisheries, up to 85% of what you're catching, you don't actually want to catch. So it's simply discarded overboard. But that literally means you're catching it, it is dead, and then you're just ditching it over the side while you're still at sea. If we look at the global fisheries, everything that we're catching, 40% of what we catch is just chucked back into the sea, dead or wounded.
Really? Okay.
So the levels of destruction or waste really is astronomical. It's huge.
And it's not this safe process where they just get tossed out and swim away.
No. Because
it disrupts the environment.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, the big trawlers, imagine you're a fish and you're in a 600 meter long...
Imagine I'm a fish.
Yeah, imagine you're in that net.
Okay,
I mean, most animals get crushed to death before they even have a chance to, and often also the nets are pulled out of the sea at a very rapid rate. So a lot of the time, fish have sort of glands inside them. They sort of regulate the pressures, and often they can't. So really, they just die pretty much just by them being pulled out of the water very rapidly. But
the fishermen don't care because they freeze them right away, and then they're off to market. So they don't.
Yeah.
Really care.
But they freeze the ones, of course, that they want. But basically, there's a lot of waste. So a lot of the fish just get sort of thrown overboard. Now, there's been a sort of effort, and especially Fish Fight is a program in the UK that's really said, this is a waste of good food, this discard, we cannot have that happening.
Fish Fighters.
Fish Fight. It's a big Channel 4 program, and a big campaign to try and make sure the EU implements some kind of ban, so the fishermen would not be allowed to discard the fish at sea. It's all very well to say this is good food wasted, but it doesn't actually matter whether we landed because it's not really commercially viable fish. Like we can't just simply sell it. And actually, really, the question is, should this be happening in the first place? If we want to stop the waste, then it's a question of stopping the waste. It's a question of stopping this non-selective type of fishing. And also, if you are sending out a fisherman and saying, hey, the scientific evidence here, shows that it's safe potentially for you to catch this sort of fish, or the scientists say, this is the health of the sort of fish population. So you assign quotas specifically based on that information. If you then say to fishermen, well, whatever you're catching extra, you can just bring on land. In a way, you're legitimizing a catch that is actually illegal.
Okay.
So that's kind of, there is, some kind of things to sort of think about. But
so you think that they should take another look at this and not say that it's okay to fish with these techniques?
Yeah, I mean, we should stop this wholesale slaughter of the ocean life, really.
Okay. Now, I know your focus now is in the Mediterranean. I think it's very smart that you're very, granular on this. It's Mediterranean. It's the tuna more than anything, or specifically?
Yeah, bluefin tuna. So that's a specific species, heavily threatened and illegally caught, and it's the use of legal drift nets.
Okay. Now, in the past, you've done some activism for dolphins in Japan. Is that right?
Yeah.
And can you tell me what happened there? I think everyone's familiar with the movie The Cove. It was very powerful. I'm from San Diego, where we had SeaWorld. I've just seen the movie called Blackfish. I don't know if you saw. I guess you probably saw that. What are your thoughts on all of those things? You know, what is it? The domestication of these large animals, and then what did you do in Japan?
It was when we first started the Blackfish that we really thought, okay, we have some great ideas, we want to do things, but we have no money. And where do we start? Like, you know, how can we do something? And what we realized is that, of course, a lot of sea animals, well, the closest connection we have to sea animals often is the fact that they're kept in Dolphinaria and these other, you know, aquariums and these sort of places. And especially for the cetaceans, dolphins and whales, especially orca, for example. I mean, they migrate thousands of miles. They communicate using sonar over hundreds of miles. Like they're, you know, they have a vast habitat. So the kind of, I mean, it's just incredibly cruel to keep these animals in very small confined pools simply to make a cheap buck out of them performing some little stunts.
Have you always felt that way?
No, not as a kid.
Okay.
I guess that at some point there was the realization. I spent a lot of time at sea, and I remember seeing orcas in the wild, like literally far, far out to sea, where suddenly there's a group of, you know, 15 orcas right next to the ship. Like, and you're there and you see these animals in the wild in their natural habitat. And if you then, you know, 2-3 years later are faced with the Dutch Dolphinarium bringing, you know, rescuing a young killer whale and putting her in a small tank and then selling her off to some other park, like then that hits you and you're like, well, this isn't right.
Yeah, there's a point at the end of the movie Blackfish where they take these SeaWorld trainers that have been training these orcas, you know, these killer whales as they're called, for like 10 years, and I don't think they've ever seen them in the wild, and they go out and they show them like all together, and they show their dorsal fins sitting straight up and like all these crazy things, and they're like almost amazed.
But it's also, this is, I think, the thing is like people, it's also about allowing people to have that experience of nature, of the marine environment. You know, as apathetic as some people around the Mediterranean are about their environment, they're also the ones that really see it and that they love it. And, you know, and especially people who live in coastal areas, you know, also fishermen, I guess, know what's going on.
Yeah.
They're the people that experience it.
Something I have to ask you. It's kept coming up in my mind, and I might as well ask about it now. Fishermen, I mean, these are the people that they live, they see, you know, they're on the water all the time. It's their livelihood. But like a lot of these guys are the ones that technically are guilty of killing these species. How does that happen? How does that transition happen in your mind? Is it the kind of way that a human can like get used to slavery, or every day just like their consciousness kind of slowly shuts down into where it's just business? I mean, you have a unique perspective. What do you think it is?
It's a really good point. It's a lot of short-term thinking, and it's a lot of very traditional perspectives of how things should be, and definitely a sort of fairly small industry. I mean, in the UK, for example, I think we're talking about 10, 11,000 people that are still employed by this industry. So it's actually really small.
Wow.
Whereas if you look at percentage-wise, it gets one of the biggest rates of subsidies in the country. So there's still this very traditional perspective also of the fishing community and the fact that we need to support it. And just to give an idea, I mean, the EU, when it first started, the Treaty of Rome, 1957, one of those founding principles of what later became the European Union, that community was there to provide agriculture and fisheries subsidies. 80% of the total budget of the EU now is fisheries and agriculture subsidies, 80%. So really the EU exists to pay fishermen and farmers to do their thing. And I think farming is, you know, that's one thing, and there are definitely issues there. But on the fishing side, I mean, especially when we're faced with massive amounts of overfishing, and you're still subsidizing that, overcapacity, new engines, new ships, fuel subsidies, everything.
You must have had conversations with fishers. You must have had conversations.
Totally.
And you're like, how can you do this?
Yeah, you're destroying your own industry.
Right. Not only that, and then there's a moral issue too, because these people live.
Yeah, and some people are aware, and a lot of other people, they just don't like outsiders telling them what to do. You know, they want to do their thing. It's what their grandfather did, and their grand.
And they have to pay the bills. So
yeah. But the thing is, I mean, what do we prioritize here? Do we prioritize the jobs of a few people? Really? Or do we prioritize essentially the survival of, you know, the proper protection of this biodiversity that we actually need?
No, that's a point. It's a good point made. Okay, I just wanted to ask you about that. But I would just quickly back to The Cove and the dolphins. If people haven't seen the movie The Cove, it won Best Picture, I think, Best Documentary, I think, that year. And I'll get your opinion on the movie as well. But it's a tale of about, as in Japan, they have the performing dolphins, and it was also consumed as a food for a long time. At least some of the theme parks in Japan, you can watch a dolphin perform and eat dolphin at the same time. It's kind of hard to conceive. And then they farm a lot of the dolphins that perform around the world in this one cove in Japan, and there's a scene at the very end where they're going in and like killing these animals, and it's quite heartbreaking to watch. So you were there. What's the town called? Taji. Yeah. So you went there, I guess, after the filming of the movie, or around the same times, or
no, it was afterwards.
What did you go there to do?
I think
what are the locals like as far as how were you received?
Well, we didn't engage with the community there so much.
But still, are there
we had a very specific goal.
Okay.
When we started the Blackfish, as I mentioned before, like we're looking at these sort of dolphinariums, and there was especially a dolphinarium in Germany where the animals were kept in terrible conditions. So we campaigned to have with other groups to have that dolphinarium shut down. And after 9 weeks of campaigning, they announced, okay, we're going to shut this. You know, the dolphins are going to be rehomed next year, and so straight away we had a campaign success. Literally within sort of 2-3 months of starting.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and what we realized is that where do these dolphins actually come from? Where do they originate from? And then there is really going into it. Suddenly you're seeing this sort of international trade of these animals that are taken from the wild. Literally, while some of their dolphins, sisters and brothers are sort of slaughtered. The bigger examples of mostly these bottlenose dolphins, which is the kind of most, I guess, the flipper type dolphin.
Yeah.
They're kept in these pens and they're flown all around the world, also to places owned by SeaWorld and other big American and European companies, to kind of, to feed their, to kind of, especially for the breeding programs. Basically, if you have a dolphinarium with some dolphins, you cannot simply continue to breed. You need to have sort of from the wild, you need to have some fresh genes in there. So you need to have some animals continually coming in from the wild. And also the mortality rate of these animals kept in captivity is very high.
Right. And most of these come from Japan?
Yeah, and a lot of these come from Japan, Solomon Islands, there's a few other places. But Japan is a big one, and Taiji is one of the biggest slaughters happens there. So we kind of thought again, how can we concretely do something? And we were investigating what was happening there. And one night there was a big storm and it was really bad weather, and we'd seen that they put 10 of these dolphins in these pens in the harbor, ready for them to be shipped out to all sort of dolphinariums all around the world. We literally had snorkeling gear and decided to go in and cut the nets and release 10 of these dolphins, and they just swam straight back out into open sea. And that had a major impact, of course, as in like suddenly there was a lot of attention for the issue. And and again, I mean, you can create media awareness about this thing, but also sometimes you need to get in there and, this is the most direct result for the animals.
Get your hands dirty. And I'm sure the Japanese weren't too impressed by that, or wouldn't have been too impressed. No. Now, some people criticized you and said you don't know if they escaped and you didn't hang around to find out what happened. And I think your response was, that's not our job. Our job is to take action. How do you respond?
We know that people the next day had documented that the remaining animals were taken out, and that actually that there were 10 missing. So I think it's pretty clear. I mean, also some people started quoting the police there, that actually has a long history of all sorts of misinformation, and they're sort of in a sort of vague attempt to try and win the sort of media war on their town, which of course they're not winning at all. Try to sort of defend it, and so there's always these accusations running around of, you weren't successful, you didn't do that, And I kind of think like, we do what we do, and when we know we have the results and we can get it verified by 1 or 2 sources of people that were there on the ground, which is what happened, then great, that's just what it is.
Could you have done more?
As the situation stood, no.
Okay.
We were literally there. This is all we could have done. And also, I mean, swimming into a big harbor in the middle of the night when it's really bad weather, just having snorkeling gear is a
just
pretty
dangerous
affair. Yeah, and you have to, and it's the same with what we did in Croatia, This year, I mean, could we have done something else this year? I don't know. You have to just kind of push the boundaries, and you have to do as much as you can, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Are you looking for like one of these two kind of like big media events, to kind of keep the organization propelled? I hate to say it like that, but it's important. It's important to have successes and to celebrate these things and be like, we did this and we did this.
I think we're stepping a little bit away from the one-off sort of spectacular action.
Okay.
Increasingly, with the vessel at sea, hopefully, next year or the year after. We also used some drones this year. We could talk about this.
I want to talk about
second.
Drones.
Yeah.
I want to talk about drones.
So these things, it is very much about telling an exciting story. Like, we need to be out there in the media. And I think the story of, and it sounds a bit corny, but ordinary people doing extraordinary things is a bit like our tagline. And it is, if we can have ordinary people that have nothing with conservation or activism, and you can train them, and they're actually in these ports where even organized crime or mafia involvement is big, and and they can collect evidence to actually affect prosecution, actually affect enforcement. I think that's really powerful.
That's a big story.
Oh, yeah.
Really big story. All right, talk to me about drones. I know you use them on a small scale and a large scale, and they're becoming. It's unfortunate because when people think drones, they think U.S. and Afghanistan, but drones can be very effective, and they are very effective even in commercial use right now. So how do you use these things?
We're going to touch with a company called Shadowview.
Okay.
Organization and company based in the Netherlands and in the UK. They developed this kind of technology for humanitarian and conservation purposes. Shadowview.org is their website, a really interesting group. And they basically decided to sort of sponsor us during the campaign we did this year. So what we did there is there's these drift nets, which have been banned for over 20 years. And especially around Italy, Albania, Tunisia, some other countries, they still use these nets, and they're catching a lot of wildlife. A lot of cetaceans get caught up in these nets. It's very much illegal, and it continues to happen. So the question there is, how can we expose it? So first of all, you have your inspectors in the ports, in the fish markets, you document what happens in coastal areas. But a big challenge and what we're talking about is really how do you effectively police the oceans? And the challenge there is that it's an enormous area. Yeah. At the moment imagine that you have Greater London Police would, or the Metropolitan Police, all the cars they have would have to patrol the entire world, kind of thing. Literally, we have a few patrol vessels to try and affect the monitoring over the entire world. It's just right. Way too little.
The scale is probably hard to fathom.
It's enormous, yeah. Right. So how can you affect cost-effective monitoring? And what we realized is that with drones, it suddenly allows you in a very cost-effective way, no bombs, just cameras on them, to actually fly out. And if you see a potential sort of illegal drift net ship leaving, it might have fishing gear in its hold that you couldn't see in the port. And the moment that it leaves the port and it's a bit further out and it starts fishing further out, when it's further out in sea, the drone allows you to fly out, it allows you to document, and suddenly you can gather that evidence.
Okay. Yeah. Can you actually can you control the drone specifically and have it go in and take some shots?
Totally, yeah. Okay. So there's a guy, there's an actual pilot, a fully trained drone pilot, sits on shore, is wearing these sort of goggles, and he's there with his, and he's literally steering it, and you're getting a live stream. Basically, back on shore, you're getting a live stream, and of course, where the technology is at the moment is that we had these small drones. We could do the coastal areas. We could, document some kind of nets or equipment that's maybe behind walls. So suddenly we could access areas or get an aerial view of a port. So that's important. And we could sort of follow some different ships out. The next step, and this is another thing besides a patrol vessel, what we're very much fundraising for, is this idea that we can have a bigger drone, an actual fixed wing. So it's an actual aircraft.
Right.
And what we're looking at is something that can do well over sort of 60, 70 miles out to sea, and potentially could automatically find targets. So essentially what it would mean is, let's say you have your vessel out and you have your radar, and suddenly you see a target appearing. It might be quite far out, and maybe you can only just about on the horizon see it. So traditionally you'd have to burn lots of fuel and actually go there, and you need to chase the ship, and it might actually not be what you're looking for. But the drone, within a half hour, you have confirmation on whether it is what you're looking for or not. So suddenly it's a very cost-effective way to just realize some effective enforcement.
Okay. Do you have to train your own people up on how to operate these things, or do you use their company to do that?
Yeah. So we work with the people from Shadowview,
right.
But very much, this is a very big thing that we're doing in the Blackfish. Yes, we work with volunteers, but we have a very big commitment to training people. So actually, we want to start training drone pilots. We want to start training marine engineers and captains, and we want, if this is a community or a movement that people get involved in, and you want to inspire them for them to make a difference, then also ensure that people have the resources and you kind of support their sort of personal development into this field. It isn't about, having sort of being morally right. It isn't sort of about being the macho activist out there. It is actually about just having people who genuinely want to make a difference,
right?
And people who gain the skills to make the difference.
That's tricky. You said the macho activist. I mean, it's tough in the morning to get up. I mean, and I don't know how you do it. I mean, how do you get up in the morning and you're like, okay, I got to do all this stuff today? I mean, are you thinking about the big catch? Because it's a lot of hard work. I mean, you're talking about this drone work, which could mean, 9 out of 10 times or 99 out of 100 times you get nothing, or maybe even you find something and the drone screws up and, all these things. I mean, how do you keep at it? What
Don't be too hard
you?
on yourself.
Okay.
All we can do is do our best.
Right.
And I think that is, that success, you gain the success by having 10 times as many failures, and you just got to keep at it, and you got to keep trying. And you asked earlier what is a bit tricky, and there are a lot of people who are skeptical. You are the new kid on the block in the conservation movement, and people kind of look at you and think, "Oh, who are you?" You just have to remain really positive. Be very supportive of what other groups do. Really find common ground with other organizations and other people that work on this issue, and just continually push it. And I think that is really the key,
I guess that's why the community really helps, because if you can fall back on people that ultimately believe in what you're doing and believe you guys are doing the right thing.
And this also has nothing to do, or to a certain part has something to do, but we're very much steering away from this self-promotional thing. We're not an organization that has all the answers. Like, we don't, know how to fix it. There's a lot of big questions. There's no easy solutions. But we're sort of, trying different things, and we're bringing some new sort of technologies and new approaches into the mix, and we're just trying them. And I think what we're realizing is that approach is really catching on, because people recognize, like, hey, it's something new. And, so there's also, I would say, it's very much about harboring that positive energy and innovation and young people and that community spirit. And in conservation, I would say that is something, whereas that might have happened in other sort of areas or other industries, or in the field of marine conservation, that hasn't happened so much. It's been very much a few bigger organizations that have dominated the kind of environment there.
Right, that have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
They have this ethos. They have a way of doing things that probably don't change quickly.
No, and they do amazing work, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Yeah, we were just trying to affect something a little bit different there.
And it's good that you guys are a small team, you're lean, you're willing to embrace the technology, and you're not trying to be all things to all people, which is exciting. What do you guys want to be in 5 years from now? I mean, if everything goes how you want it, what are you looking at, funding-wise, fleet-wise, and even location-wise for your activity?
I would say in about 5 years' time, we have year-round patrols in the Baltic Sea, Mediterranean. Those are two areas where a lot of illegality is happening. I would say we have a big network of citizen inspectors. So essentially we have a citizen-led enforcement network that really covers the majority of the bigger ports in Europe. And I would say we have some drones, potentially also some smaller aircraft that fly out and do sort of systematic patrols. And really we are affecting the enforcement of the laws in places where now it's pretty much lawless. The moment we get that prosecution in southern Italy, where so far the Coast Guard is incredibly corrupt and no fisherman ever gets prosecuted, the moment we get that first prosecution kickstarted there, that's going to be a major, major achievement. And not just on the fishing side. I think, even on the fight to stop organized crime, really.
Right, once they get on notice that this is possible, that's when changes start happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen it happen with other countries that have been invited into EU. You've seen it with a lot of these outer nations where they have to clean up everything before they're allowed in. Maybe that's something that Croatia's going to have to deal with as well.
Croatia, Turkey, these are countries where there's massive amounts of illegality. And unfortunately, fishing up until this point hasn't been very high on the priority list. And I guess we're just, also very much trying to stir up and create that controversy a bit to ensure that, also those EU negotiators are starting to sort of take note of this. Because no country within the EU can really, or should really be involved in, illegal drift netting, dynamite fishing, all these sort of things that are still taking place.
Right. No, that's exciting stuff. I'm going to finish off and ask you a question I always ask our guests on London Reel. It's a little bit of a personal question, but you're going to be all right. If you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Wietse and give that young man a bit of advice, what would you tell him?
That's a good one. I guess I used to be I used to think in dogmas. I've realized things aren't as black and white.
Okay, what's an example of a dogma?
Well, an example is, I guess I very much grew up in this sort of, protest culture, this protest movement, and that's very much sort of a subculture, sub-scene, and I've realized that, really that isn't for me. And really, if I want to get on with things, you need to really embrace many different people from many different backgrounds to get involved. So as much as we are now an activist group or an activist organization, in a way, we're very much moving away from that, and we're really, really working to become truly accessible to many, many different people. And I think we're seeing that many people get involved, on many different levels, and I think that is really exciting. That's when you move sort of beyond, just making your sort of moral stance.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting, because a lot of people would err the other way, and they'd be like, no, we have to be the rebels, the people that are doing it. But you want to embrace everyone. You want to.
Yeah, and I also think the question is what is new, The fact that you're out there and you're trying to make a point, okay, that's fair enough, but, we've made these points for the last 20, 30, 40 years. So, I guess what we're seeing on the enforcement side, we're thinking we can make some very structural, we can have some structural results there. And I think, of course, and it is a strong thing on the enforcement side also, because those people that are tasked with enforcement aren't really getting the support they need from politicians. So in a way, we're actually there to support that fishing inspector that's out there, that Coast Guard official, those people that really aren't getting the full support or even the proper money they need to do their work effectively.
Right. That's another way of
And I find that very, very odd. Early next year, we're going to announce the creation of a new advisory board in the Blackfish, where we have a number of enforcement officials that actually, structurally advise us on our work, on how to go about the enforcement, the investigations, the campaigns. I think that's really, when activists and enforcement people sort of gather,
that gets interesting.
Combined strength, yeah.
We've had a few guests recently from the group LEAP, which is LEAP, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. So a lot of these law enforcement officials are against this war on drugs because they find it just as frustrating as everyone else because they can't do their job or they're doing the wrong job. They're arresting kids for marijuana possession where all the people, drinking are going to the A&E room and they're like, what's going on here? And they find a disconnect with, enforcement and the law.
And these things I think this is also something where perhaps this is also the dogmatic thinking or those barriers are changing, this is an issue that's going to affect everyone, and even governments, even politicians and enforcement people are going to be faced with big challenges. So in a way, I also think, the only thing that we know for certain is that there is a future and that it will be different. That is what we know for a fact. So it's very much not necessarily about having some dream about change. Change is inevitable, and so much is at stake that really it's just a question of pushing the change in the right direction and just help form it.
Good point there. The last bit of that question is to the 20-year-old that's listening to us right now, who wants to get involved, who wants to do something, whether it's being a part of Blackfish or whether it's just like you said, doing something on their own. What do they do? How can they get involved? I
would say that the biggest thing is just start being informed, start listening to what we have to say, what other similar organizations have to say. If what you're hearing about the ocean is something that kind of hits you and you think, wow, maybe I wasn't so aware. Make yourself aware. Educate yourself on these issues. We have a film called Losing Nemo, an animation film.
Yeah, I watched it. It's good.
Yeah, theblackfish.org/film is where you can see it. And, there's actually many facts in there. And it also references to lots of other organizations that you can potentially also contact for more information. And really, it's just about getting involved somehow. We have different opportunities. We offer these training programs. We have these different events around the UK and other countries. We have a big volunteer network. We do train people to also be part of our sort of investigative campaigns. There's many, many opportunities, but it does need people to kind of learn a bit more and really take the initiative to contact us, and we really start the conversation from there.
Right. You need people to step up, and it sounds like in your organization, you like activity. Like, it sounds like you really like people that actually go and do things.
Well, yeah. Our office team stays as small as it possibly can to just do the work. And I mean, in that sense, I guess we really view ourselves as a movement instead of an NGO. Like, we're very much... we need to be out there. We need to be on the ground,
right,
doing this sort of work.
I like that about you, Wietse. Thank you so much for being here. I really like you guys because you're actually doing things. You're not afraid to go out there and get on the scuba gear and slice those nets up, or to go into Japan. And I mean, I can only imagine, like you said, like even scuba diving in the dark in a storm is probably a really stupid idea. Let alone slicing nets with some Japanese guys as their livelihood, who have seen the movie and are tired of all the white people coming into their town. So I applaud you guys for taking that activism, and I do think that, like you said, this whole new spirit of dealing, of being an organization and not an NGO and a movement is really important. And I think that's what's exciting about you guys. So, I applaud what you're doing. How do people get in touch with you? Follow you, Twitter, Facebook, website, the whole thing?
theblackfish.org, theblackfish.org is our website. Twitter, Facebook, we're very active on it. People can always email us. And, I don't know. Check us out.
Okay, good. What did you think of The Cove and the movie Blackfish? What were your overall feelings on those?
I think they're really good. I think it's, of course, very powerful, and it brings these issues to a lot bigger audience. What I would say is that, we've at one point made the decision to move away from it. I do care about that one killer whale or those few killer whales that are in SeaWorld. I think something needs to be done about it. But when there's thousands of killer whales that get entangled in derelict fishing gear, when there's lots and lots of dolphins that get caught up in pair trawling in the North Sea, really the kind of levels of of cruelty are on a whole different scale. To give you one more fact, there is that illegal drift nets every year in the Mediterranean are estimated to kill 10,000 cetaceans, 10,000 dolphins and whales. This is actually more than all the victims of all the whale hunts and dolphin slaughters in the world combined. So, I think really, fishing is really where it's at, like, in terms of the kind of level of destruction to the ocean. So I just like to say to people, think about it and get involved.
That's well said. Run the numbers, and then you'll see. Yeah, I'm in two minds. I watched that show. I grew up in San Diego. I had my Shamu stuffed animal, and so I do see the value of presenting young children with seeing those spectacles, but I also see the wrongness of it at the same time. So I don't know if there's maybe the medium is you take people out into the wild to see that phenomenon, but it's important that you remind us of what you're saying as far as it's a scale of. Not a factor of 10, but a factor of much more than that. What's going on in the world?
And David Attenborough famously said, "Saving whales won't save the ocean." And it's a good point. Yes, we need to save the whales. We totally need to protect them. But it's where things start, and we need to look at the bigger picture. And when we can get similar appreciation for species like tuna and swordfish and mackerel, and when people really realize the bigger picture of what's happening and they really care for it, then we can start doing some really big things to put things right. Okay,
excellent. Amen to that. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you can see both of our lovely faces on a YouTube channel, London Real. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. If you want to help us out, we're a bit of a movement as well. So we're always looking for help in any way. If you've got guests that you think are great, one of your compatriots, Graham, is the reason you're here. He emailed me and said, check this out. So it literally happens that fast if it's a great story. So get in touch with us. As we say on London Real, it's about the journey. Wietse, I wish you well on yours.
Thank you.
All right, take care. This week on London Real, I have a one-to-one chat with extreme entrepreneur Peter Sage.
Because most people have a death grip on how they think reality should look like, and all stress comes from life not fitting your pictures.
When you're not forcing something and you're actually enjoying everything that you do, you attract all of these people and all these energy and all these opportunities.
100%. I'm no longer sitting on the shore waiting for my ship to come in. That's Disneyland thinking. That's never going to happen.
People love to hear the victim story. That's all the news is.
If I understand other people rather than project my own model of the world onto them, then I'll have a little more tolerance in my life.
I'm curious what you think of psychedelics.
A ship in a harbor is a safe ship, but that's not what ships are built for.
That's one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Yeah, it makes it real.
And I do this every week. On Sunday, London Real presents Peter Sage, extreme entrepreneur.
That's it. Stress is a byproduct of you thinking that life should look a different way to where it is right now.